You know, from the last few days where BlizzCon was taking place, we kind of let the current changes for 9.0.5 go in the background, not really mentioned because something bigger was taking place. But now that BlizzCon is over and now that most of the arguments have been talked about, we can go back and talk about some of the additions that have been transpired from the current closest patch we're going to have, which is 9.0.5. There are some changes, few changes to certain legendaries, and then some other additions and quality of life improvements planned for 9.0.5, which we couldn't mention in the last few days due to BlizzCon, but now we can. So then we have some quality of life, finally. So the first quality of life is a little bit sad, because the quality of life is the fact that when you will complete a Mythic Keystone dungeon after the timer has ended, so if you are depleting the key, you are now going to get a second item anyways. Now, for those of you who are unaware, you are already getting 2 items from Mythic Plus, but when you deplete the key, you don't get an item. You get an item because you complete the key, and you get an item because you time it. If you don't time the key, obviously you only get 1 item. Now, with this sort of participation trophy change, you're going to still get the second item, but the second item is going to be 1 tier below of what you could have gotten. So if you were going into a key which awarded you 210 item level and you deplete it, the second item is going to be 207. If you're going to be, a key that dropped 200 item level item and you deplete it, it's going to drop 197. So you're still getting the second item, but it is weaker, 1 tier below. I don't know exactly just how well it is going to make you feel after you deplete a key, getting a second scuffed item, but it's still better than nothing, I guess. Another quality of life change is regarding raids, because now the Great Vault in 9.0.5 is planned to reduce the requirements for raid boss kills. Now, currently in the game, it is 3, 7, and 10 to get 1 and 2 and 3 options from the Great Vault. Now, in 9.0.5 is going to be 3, 6, and 9. So you're going to get 1 less boss for your second and third options of the Great Vault that are required to be killed. I guess this is particularly good for pugs, because this effectively means you can basically skip the Natrius kill, for example, for people that have trouble killing the Natrius. Getting 9 bosses now means you don't even have to bother with the Natrius anymore. Of course, it's still good because of the item level of the Natrius, but now you don't have to worry about that. It is also going to be better for raiding guilds, because now they can swap, rotate in and out players while still making sure they get to their breakpoint. Before it's pretty annoying if you are, for example, a guild that can kill 7 bosses, and basically means whoever gets benched for any of the 7 bosses is not going to get the second option from the Great Vault. So this was also sort of slowing down the progression, the item level, the gearing up progression that you could have gotten. And now this is going to make it more flexible, faster, and easier. Another quality of life change that is going to come in raids is that Potency Conduits now are going to drop from Casonatria. Before, you had this weird decision by Blizzard to basically put all of the Endurance and Finesse Conduits from the raids and then just not the Potency ones. Now, you will be able to. Now, all of the Potency Conduits are just going to get crammed into the loot table of raid encounters. So you can get the 213 from Heroic and the 226 for Mythic. You also have some very well awaited and very eagerly expected change regarding your weekly and daily rewards. One is regarding your renown with your covenant once you have to go and do the weekly quest to gather anima, and the other one is regarding the weekly quests for the souls for your covenant. What's going to happen essentially when you get to max renown? What's going to happen when you are capping your redeemed souls, which is very, very quickly because people don't have enough anima to spend all the souls they're getting. So what's going to happen in 9.0.5 is that if you get to 40 renown, the weekly quest for anima is now going to also give you 1500 gold, because of course you're not getting renown anymore, so at least now you're getting gold. And then the weekly quest for souls, if you're capped in souls, it's also going to give you 500 anima. So good rewards, and also they work off of each other. You can get both quests at the same time, do the quests for the redeemed souls first, and get the 500 anima to get you quicker to the 1000 anima you need for the weekly. That's pretty cool. Specifically for alts, if you want to get this done quicker, you don't have to do like world quest every time to get anima. This is going to sort of jumpstart the anima generation right at the start of the week. And then the bigger change of the week, it is something that has not been this way for 9 years, actually. We were approaching a decade-long anniversary of this. Rhinestone sunglasses can now be used in transmogrification and will appear in your collection once found. So the stylish glasses that you could craft in Cataclysm and for some reason were never added to the transmogrification pool of items in 9.0.5 will be. so you will be able to use them. I'm not a big Transmog player, so I'm not exactly sure how rated these helmet is when it comes to Transmog. It does look pretty cool though. Now onto the tiny bit about legendary changes. A couple of them are very recent, just of today, yesterday, and then a few of them left behind since they happened during and throughout BlizzCon. We're talking about Prot Paladin, Hunter, and Demon Hunter. One, mages, don't get anxious or don't get excited. It's just basically a tooltip change. Disciplinary command is still working the same as before. It's basically getting buffed from the critical strike damage extra from 15 to 20%. That's it. The more relevant change is the one to the Ardent Protector Santum. It was the reworked legendary for Protection Paladin in the pipeline for 9.0.5. The original one was the typical, your legendary is going to do something to one of your allies, which was garbage. The effect was cool, 10% more DR on Ardent Defender is okay, but the extra effect of the party bonus wasn't just good enough. The rework has been reworked again. So previously, the rework was, let's say, expected to reduce the cooldown of Ardent Defender to 60 seconds if you didn't die while Ardent Defender was active. So it didn't matter if you had 66 seconds left, if you had 84 seconds left, if you had 90 seconds left, it would just go down to 60 by default. Now, this was very good for Protection Paladin because it basically allowed you, for once, to play with a little bit more variety and freedom in your level 35 talent row. Because currently, the level 35 talent row was dominated by Unbreakable Spirit, the talent which is going to reduce the cooldown of your big defensives. This talent was also planned, because 9.0.5 isn't out yet, but if it went out, it was planned to devalue this new legendary, because with Unbreakable Spirit, your Ardent Defender went from 120 seconds to 80 second cooldown. With the Conduit, you could already extend the duration so that when Ardent Defender ended, you had 70 seconds left on the cooldown, plus the Conduit was also reducing the cooldown of Ardent Defender, so you went down to something like 68, 67 seconds left, and then the legendary would reset it to 60. So effectively, if you were playing with this talent, the cooldown reduction of the legendary was pitiful. It would allow you to choose other talents in that row without feeling that bad anymore, because without Unbreakable Spirit, you would have the legendary to give you a lot of CDR. Now though, the change to legendary is that rather than reducing the cooldown of Ardent Defender to 60 seconds, the cooldown is now reduced to a flat 40%. So regardless of how long the cooldown of your Ardent Defender is, if you're playing without Ardent Defender, if you're playing with Ardent Defender, if you're reducing the cooldown with the Conduit or not, doesn't matter. The moment Ardent Defender ends, you look at the cooldown and it gets cut by 40%. If you're playing with Ardent Defender, if you're playing with the Conduit, this is going to make your Ardent Defender go down to at least 40-second cooldown, more or less. That is going to be even better than what it was before, even better than what it was planned to be. So this is a buff. If you are unsure of what this means, this is making the legendary stronger, assuming you are even going to play with this legendary. I thought you would have, because I was hoping you were able to use 2 legendaries instead of 1. If you're using only 1, now that we know we can only use 1 in 9.0.5 and 9.1, I'm not sure this is going to be used, but if it will, this is definitely helping. Then we have some changes to Vengeance Demon Hunter. You have Fell Bombardment, the legendary, which isn't really played, which was buffed. The duration, the buff duration, where you can keep the stacks up before you basically spend them, went from 30 to 40 seconds, and the chance to trigger when you use Immolation Aura increased by 5%. The bigger change, again, could have been much bigger if you actually were able to use 2 legendaries. The casted I-Beam from Collective Anguish's summoned ally now always crits. This is important because I-Beam, as you know, as a Demon Hunter, always crits for Havoc Demon Hunter, but Vengeance doesn't have that passive. Vengeance doesn't have the Havoc passive, which makes your I-Beam crit. So when you use this legendary, as a Vengeance, you cast the I-Beam, but you don't have the passive that makes it crit. Now you do. Now it's basically automatic with the legendary. This is also very good. Unfortunately, again, because you can't use 2 legendaries, it's very unlikely that Vengeance Demon Hunters will go and start using this legendary instead, purely because they have an entire well-defined playstyle around Firebrand and their Firebrand legendary. So yes, it's a pretty good buff, and it's gonna be much better when you can use 2 legendaries. Now, with just 1, this isn't that powerful. Then, lastly, one of the nerfs that I didn't touch on a few days ago when the first round of all of these changes came through in the PTR notes is the fact that Serpent Stalker's Trickery, the 2-go legendary for almost all content for marksmanship hunters, no longer triggers Wild Spirit twice. Serpent Stalker's trickery obviously has the function of basically casting Aim Shot and then recasting basically a Serpent Sting, which would make Wild Spirit trigger twice because you're landing 2 attacks, meaning Wild Spirit extra attack in the area is going to trigger twice. Now it's not going to work anymore. So this is not going to mean that Wild Spirit is going to be half as effective for Maximum Ship Hunters, but it is going to lose quite a lot of damage in AoE situations. It is a pretty substantial, I would say, nerf to their AoE burst power. We'll have to see just how much of an effect it's going to have in Mythic Plus, because this is mostly where it is going to be affected. In raids, this wasn't as, important. In raids, there were much less heavy AoE situations where Wild Spirits was getting a lot of value. It is more single target heavy, which is also why marksmanship in raids is not as powerful as it can be in Mythic Plus. It is still a pretty hefty nerf though to their AoE. Now on to some more Blizzard statements, because as we go past BlizzCon, we are getting more and more interviews, exclusive interviews that the Blizzard developers gave to several news sites, gaming sites, MMO sites, etc., etc. So as we go on, we get more and more releases. And today was the day of Gamersky, which is a Chinese site. Now, I have to congratulate Gamersky, because of all the news sites that took interviews with Blizzard devs, they were actually the ones to ask the better questions, as opposed to many of the other sites, Western sites. Of course, we had to help ourselves with Google Translate, but more or less you can understand the sentences that Eon is trying to give out. For example, Torghast Guilty Soul Tower is a very interesting gameplay, but players only climb the tower for the orange material, but they will not climb the tower again after the orange material is saturated. Will more rewards be added in the future to attract players to continue climbing the tower? We currently think that after players have orange outfits, it's no problem for them to climb less towers. After all, they still have so many other content to play. In version 9.1, we have updated a lot of content for Torghast, including new open areas, new enemies, heart power, and of course there will be rewards. So, very clear statement given by Eon, but what I wanted to focus a little bit were a couple of questions. One was something that a lot of the community is very interested in, again, similar to the thing regarding character customization and allied races. It's not something that I care too much about, but apparently much of the community does. This was regarding farming old raids, farming old content, legacy content, particularly around Legion. So what's happening right now is that old content is very hard to farm. Of course, BFA is not legacy implemented, meaning it's basically scaling with your item level and it's not getting the free higher scaling of your character, meaning you can enter a raid and just stomp it easily. But usually, at least before Shadowlands, you could have gone 2 expansions back and been able to get the legacy buff. So if you were doing, for example, something like a Warlords of Draenor raid in BFA. This is currently not the case in Legion. Legion bosses are much harder and people have been complaining that they are more difficult to do. Apparently, the answer of Eon is that our principle is at the end of an expansion, you will be able to solo the content 2 expansions ago fairly easily. So by the end of Shadowlands, you should be able to kill the Legion raid bosses fairly easily, but not at the start. So essentially the explanation is that this is working as intended. You are supposed to struggle a little bit more, even though this is going to be legacy content, even though this is going to be something that you can farm. You can farm a raid boss of a couple of expansions ago only after you start scaling a little bit more in gear. I'm not sure I agree with this explanation, because apparently he mentions it as it being their principle, even though this principle didn't really exist in BFA or Legion or Warlords. So I'm not sure when this changed and why, but at least now you have an answer as to what's going on. It's not a bug. It's not, fucked up scaling. It's actually intended. Then Eon also gave an explanation on the whys of the reduction of loot, at least intended at the start of the expansion. The question was, of course, why did the design team set the difficulty of obtaining the loot in this expansion so high in the first place? And what considerations did they have to go through in 9.1 and 9.0.5 to re-up the amount of loot? They are doing it in Mythic Plus in 9.0.5 with Valor, and then they will be doing it in raids in 9.1. So that's a pretty quick change of mind. The explanation, of course, is that in the past few years, they have increased equipment drops from various channels. In Warlords of Draenor, you could get as high as like 6 items per boss, plus the bonus rolls, plus items gaining extra value because of Warforging, and later on because of Titan Forging. So the explanation was that players need to rely on extra luck to pursue Titan Warfare to obtain upgraded version of the item. It's a never-ending treadmill where you basically can never get best in slot. Every single item can always Titan Forge, Warforge, get a socket, get a corruption, and whatever. When we removed this system, when we stripped the gearing up system of all of this RNG and all of this extra loot, we realized that we needed to reduce the drop rates of the gear to give players a sense of chasing goals, a sense of making every piece of gear count. No more bank and bags with 3 lines of gear that you swap every time or that you keep in the bag just because in the case of certain corruptions getting nerfed or buffed. Now you will know that since this was announced and since this was talked about months ago, I was always very positive towards this change. I always hated the extra saturation of gear in the game, devaluing effectively your progression as a character and your chasing of best in slot gear, because you were always in this sort of feeling that every type of item can always be an improvement. No matter what item you're getting, you can always get something better. And the fact that your path to progression was super wonky. You're a Mythic Raider, you can still be doing a world quest and Titan Forge an item that is going to be better than anything you can get in the raid. You know, this type of situations, so I never liked it. I was happy that we went back to an older, more strict and simple looting system. However, of course, the number was the problem. Too little loot in Mythic Plus, too little loot in raids, which created this, wave of complaint regarding the looting system, which is being changed in 9.0.5 and will be changed in 9.1. So I'm happy they went for a change of art from BFA to Shadowlands, and then they realized there was something wrong, so they're going for a double change of art in the next couple of patches, hoping this is going to make it a little bit better to gear up. Lastly, in the line of interviews and news regarding Shadowlands, we have some lore, some OMEGALUL. So number one, we are going to get some more info and story regarding Nerf in Chains of Domination. I know nobody actually cares about this stuff, but just so you know, Nerf was also supposed to be working for the jailer, and the jailer basically called him a failure for essentially not following what he was supposed to be doing. Then another one is we're gonna get more stuff regarding Garrosh. Not really the center of the story, not really a major character at all, but we're still going to get essentially the explanation as to why he ended up in Revendreth. Not really why, but it's pretty obvious why, but at least a closure to the story. After all, you don't put it in the trailer, in the Afterlives miniseries they released before the expansion, if you don't plan on actually using him in the expansion. And then lastly, this is the one that interests me the most, although I know it is a little bit insensitive to talk about this because it's a book and you guys don't know how to read, so sorry if I'm hitting a touchy subject, but there's going to be a book, The Grimoire of the Shadowlands, written from the point of view of a broker. This is going to be the next in line book for the World of Warcraft lore. Now, with this bunch of news added to the collection of 9.0.5 and 9.1 news, we can stop for the day. This is the last day of the reset. I guess in NA, it's just about to be the next week. I'm going to be talking a little bit about next week. It's been a long time since I actually talked about the game. It's been a long time since I talked about raids or Mythic Plus or whatnot. We have been busy with other news recently, so there hasn't been quite the time. So it's time to go back a little bit to that type of content. See you guys tomorrow. And in the meantime, I agree. Garrosh did nothing wrong.